By far one of the most infamous aspects of all of Ninjago is the case of leaks. Leaks are seemingly inevitable nowadays, case in point, as of the time of filming, Season 4 Part 2 just leaked onto the internet. And it's a shame, it's a terrible thing. Honestly, it's one of the worst parts of being a Ninjago fan nowadays. It sucks when things leak, but unfortunately, it is just simply the case. But there is another thing that does happen when it does come to Ninjago seasons that is not as talked about, because they're not as frequent and they're not as dire as leaks actually are. And that is the simple case of Ninjago spoiling itself. And you may be wondering how that is actually the case. Well, it is a pretty simple one, and we're gonna go through 5 examples of it today. Talk about instances where Ninjago has spoiled itself in terms of plot reveals or story directions that it is going to go down. It is something that happens fairly frequently, but of course is also something that is not as crazy as leaks, like I said. But let me not waste any more of your time, and let's get into the case of Ninjago spoiling itself, because I think it's very fascinating to actually take a look at. Now, you may be wondering how LEGO actually does spoil themselves in terms of Ninjago. Well, it's fairly simple. One thing that is basically a guarantee when it does come to Ninjago release cycles is the case of seeing the Ninjago sets before we actually see the Ninjago season. Typically speaking, Ninjago releases sets around either January, March, and June. And always going to be the case is the fact that the season that it's related to does come out a few months later. So we have a general idea on what's going on before we even get to see it. And the thing is that comes with problems, because when those sets release, we receive minifigures, locations, product animations, all of those things that come together that tells you a vague story on what could actually be the case. Many times this has happened, and it's definitely time to take a look in 5 of the most infamous examples. The first one, and one of the earliest cases of this, was actually from the Day of the Departed wave, releasing in July of 2016, whereas Day of the Departed itself released in October, we received a handful of sets that told us a story on what was actually going to happen when it did come to the special. But one of the main things that it did come along with was the case of the Cole minifigures. These minifigures were fantastic, they were amazing to actually have, but the problem that came alongside it was the case of, simply put, we figured out that Cole was going to become human once more because the set showed us with him and a human face. It did have the ghost scar, and it did lead to a lot of speculation as to how that would come to be, but it was regardless of the fact that it was clear as day that we were going to see Cole return to being a human. This is a massive shame in retrospect, because the reveal of Cole becoming a human could have been fantastic to see. It was all but confirmed it was going to be the case, which is just sad. I do think it would have been a nice reveal for the end of it, and definitely would have been a nice positive note to have ended Day of the Departed on. But of course, ultimately, by the point in time where it did release, we were more than familiar with what was going to happen. Like I said, in retrospect, it does hurt, but I don't think it was as bad as a reveal as what we actually then got later down the line. So let's get into the other ones. The second one is going to be coming from the crystallized wave, and spoiler alert, so does the third one. But the thing is that we received 2 massive spoilers in terms of what was coming next in terms of 2 characters because of the crystallized sets. What we received during that wave was a minifigure with the depiction of Harumi. We also got a minifigure with the depiction of the Overlord. And do you know what? We'll take a bonus third one. We also got one of Samurai X. This one could have not have been Nia, but it was very clear that it was going to be. It could have been Pixel for all we knew, but that was kind of just up in the air. But it was regardless of the fact that the crystallized wave did give us many reveals when it did come to the villains. Honestly, you could basically attribute the entirety of the Crystal Council to this case of spoiling itself. You could also attribute it to Garmadon, but I do think Harumi and the Overlord were the 2 main ones, because these were 2 characters that no one was expecting to come back. Every other character was at least conceived of being alive as of that point in in the show. So to see the Overlord and Harumi in these sets were definitely something that took a lot of people off guard. I distinctly remember when the blurry images of Crystallize actually came out, and honestly kind of being in denial. I assumed that it was anything but Harumi and the Overlord, and something along the lines of what we saw in Prime Empire, but obviously I was completely wrong. In retrospect, it's really a shame that they did have these reveals within the sets. There's no way around it, but it still is just a shame that this is how we got to find out. So I honestly think to an extent it did make that reveal worse. Like I said, in retrospect, the Crystallized wave really did just tell us all we needed to know when it did come to Crystallize, because it is even then again beyond just the villains. The Dragon Ninja, the ninjas changing in suits, the golden weapons, everything about that wave really did just tell us everything we needed to know. It is a severe case of Ninjago spoiling itself in my opinion. Obviously again, and this is the point for all of them, there is just no way around it unless they just want to be a wave behind with the sets, but I do just think still regardless it is a massive shame, and by definition, a case of spoiling. But yeah, there's a massive one when it comes to Crystallized. I thought there was only going to be 2, but in retrospect, there's a lot more characters to it. But let's go to the next ones, because this is where we move into the case of Dragon's Rising set spoiling themselves. The first one, and I think the pretty major one, was definitely going to be the case of Jay. Jay had, of course, these non-canon suits that we got to see in terms of the merge, the mech, and also the climber suits, but that was honestly kind of come to be expected. It's something that Ninjago just kind of did. But the thing is that come the point of the Season 2 Part 2 sets in 2024, we noticed that Jay had a very distinct change up. He had a very different looking outfit, his own unique style, his own unique aspect of the set itself, and it definitely did raise a lot of eyebrows. A lot of people curious as to what it did truly mean. But of course, it meant one thing in particular: Jay was returning. And not just returning, very clearly returning as an evil variant of himself. This is a huge spoiler when it does come to Jay. Imagine walking into Season 2 Part 2 not knowing that that was coming. It could have been a giant and very dramatic reveal, but of course it ended up not going as much as planned because we just simply knew that it was going to be the case. I think, again in retrospect, this is just a massive shame. This is definitely one of those ones that I think I would have wanted to have be completely unspoiled the most of all of the ones, but I do think it's still fine regardless, and I love the minifigure, but it definitely did just feel a bit of a shame. In similar vein to Crystallized, I will say though, this isn't included in the 5 that I did set out to talk about, but I will also mention that they did basically do this with Rogue as well. Rogue was meant to be this mysterious warrior, but as soon as we got the sets, it was the Jay face print. Again, just completely spoiling that reveal when the show itself was definitely building up to the fact of showing off that it was Jay. Again, feels like a massive shame and definitely does feel like noting. But I do think all of these, whilst they're bad, I don't think is as significant as the last one that I want to talk about. And that one is Moro. Moro was shown off in the set for Season 3 Part 1, in a new outfit, a new style, a new everything. And this definitely came as one of the biggest shocks and one of the biggest reveals in terms of Ninjago spoiling itself that I think we've seen in all of its history. This reveal came as a complete surprise. By this point in time, Moro was gone for a very long time and definitely wasn't something that people were expecting to see again. Moro was by all accounts gone, and it was to the point where people even wondered if the minifigure was going to be canon to the show, but of course it ended up being the case. But this made people go in expecting Moro. This made people assume that Moro was going to be a part of the new Ninjago season, and again was a massive reveal that could have been interesting if we didn't know. This definitely does serve as the pinnacle of the overall point of the video. Whilst there is nothing that can be done about it, and whilst it's something that is just inevitable to happen, it really does show how the reveals of the show itself is compromised by the sets. All of these reveals, all of these characters returning could have been something special if we didn't know about them from the sets 6 months prior. And I think that is the biggest thing for me. I really do wish there was a way around it. I don't think there is, and that's a massive shame, but it doesn't take away from the fact that Ninjago is in a repetitive cycle of spoiling spoiling itself just simply down to the fact that they want to have minifigures that represent the season that they are coming from. Ninjago could feel so much more different in terms of its reactions if we just didn't see these sets beforehand. Of course, you can actively opt to not look at them, but they're kind of difficult to avoid when you are within the Ninjago community, and I think that is just it. Maybe one day there will be a way around it. I don't think it's going to happen, and that's really sad to see, but it doesn't take away from the fact that these reveals are still something special nonetheless. And so are the minifigures. I love the Moro minifigure. I love all of the versions of Jay. I love the Cole from Day of the Departed. Do I love them more than the spoil of the reveal? I don't know. But I think that's where I want to ask what you guys think about it. Because would you rather have sets that don't spoil the show but may be missing characters for a while, or would you rather continue on with the sets that we do get and know, vaguely speaking, what happens when it does come to the show? I do think it's a very interesting opposite end, and depending on how much you're into the Lego itself, it may actually change your answer. But that is why I'm curious. I hope to hear both sides because I do think it's fascinating. I do think, as it stands for me, I'm happy just to continue on as is, but it just does make me wonder, what if? But thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoy, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people, and if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you can always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of your support means the absolute world to me, and I truly cannot thank you enough. But like I said, that's about it for today, and take care. Okay, bye!